Good evening. I must not leave the circle, for tonight the bad ones are coming. Actually, there is a kind of inner circle of great cultural figures who are bad, who use creative badness to criticize what they see because it isn't good enough. And what is good, they reject. Keep out of the circle, Sir Cliff Richard, they cry if they're Iggy Pop, or Lord Byron, or the Marquis de Sade. Of course, this circle isn't real, but then neither are good and evil, especially nowadays. For what could bad behavior be today, when what's bad is good and what's good is bad?
Compared to the past, everything is a little upside down for us. We're brought up to believe in a system of good and evil, but we know it's not the whole story. There's something honeyed and saccharine about the good, which is bad, and something good about badness. Why be bad? Society says the bad must be punished, but culture seems to say the opposite. Thou shalt transgress and be rewarded with lots of success, many record sales and exhibitions in art galleries. 19th century Romanticism was obsessed by radical outsiderness, because whatever was other, deviant, strange was valued by anyone who was creative. We like that stuff too, but there's been a lot of changes in how we like our badness served up. Where artists and creative people in the past made things that challenged morality, now they say, look at the taboos that society still has, and think what it might mean not to adhere to them. On MTV now, death rocks. Why? Nowadays we have a liberal system with no absolute prevailing morality that we all agree on, except that anything goes. We don't know if we're the wardens or the inmates. But what about real atrocity, abuse, murder, genocide, rape? We have a double way of looking at those things. We would be profoundly sorry if it happened to any of our family members. Really, what artists are interested in is the fakery of people's attitudinizing about those things. This is beyond the pale, the public says about the Chapman brothers' death camp artwork. Is it because of the little air-fixed Nazis, or because of the £500,000 price tag? We have charades of badness nowadays, virtual badness. There's always been an element of camp to badness. Ooh, what is that horrible dragging chain sound? It's a gothic villain from the romantic past, our deviant number one, with lessons for us about the dark side of romanticism. The Dark Lord, the noble gone wrong, the corrupted aristo, Lord Byron, the great romantic poet born in 1788, who died abroad fighting for freedom in 1824 when he was only 36. He lived a life of shocking immorality. He was a household name throughout Europe, a hero and a villain all in one. He was shunned by society because of his scandalous affairs and his violent marriage. He went from most popular poet to worst villain over a period of a few months in 1816, when he was only 28.
For most people, Lord Byron sounds like a Ken Russell film from the 1970s, something gothic, swooning, extreme. In fact, Byron was extreme. He was extremely contradictory. He died young, defending noble Greece against the barbarian Turks, but his poem Don Juan, an epic 600 pages in length, published in parts over many years, was a moral shocker. It was blasphemous and it was obscene, and it earned him the reputation of being mad, bad and dangerous to know. Byron said he just wanted to show the antipodes of human nature, the opposites of human nature, and in his life and his art he certainly embodied both of those. Defending civilization, having sex with his sister upstairs while his pregnant wife wept downstairs. For him, both of these naturally went together.
In Don Juan, love is full of pain as much as pleasure. In fact, it's better for Byron if there's slightly more pain. When Don Juan makes love to a pirate's daughter, the love is pure. Inevitably, after a few pages, she's gone first into a frenzy, then a coma, and then died. Alas, they were so young, so beautiful, so lonely,
loving, helpless, and the hour was that in which the heart is always full, and having o'er itself no further power, prompts deeds eternity cannot annul, but pays off moments in an endless shower of hellfire, all prepared for people giving pleasure or pain to one another living.
Byron's friends were appalled that he exposed his every inner thought in Don Juan. His critics were appalled that he was willing to make any thought that came into his head into poetry. Base things like marital hypocrisy, cynical sex, infidelity, on the same page as high-flown descriptions of nature. It seemed like career suicide, but, appalled as everyone was, they couldn't stop thinking about him.
Why do we need this figure to scapegoat or to praise, or why is that such a rich archetype for us?
Because he is the personification, and because of the great poetry that he wrote. And I think we all agree that he would not have written such poetry, as far as we can see, if he hadn't lived such an extraordinary life.
So it's living the life. There are lots of great poets, but this one, our culture has, we have a trade named after him, Byronic.
Well, he was. I mean, he was the great romanticist, far more, really, than Keats or Shelley.
Nowadays, people like to think that romanticism is kind of a construction, and so people are busy deconstructing it and looking at what are the elements that make it up.
No, I think you're either born a romantic or you're not.
What does it mean to be born romantic? The Byronic image is to be broken-hearted, doomy, and a monster of self-indulgence. He fired pistols into the ceiling when his wife, Lady Annabella Milbank, whom he married for her respectability and money, was upstairs pregnant. He raped her when he was drunk. He did have noble ideals about freedom, but mostly his life was about following impulse and appetite, unless appetite interfered with his desire for celebrity. Rather than tortured by a broken heart, Byron was actually rather hearty, in fact, naturally beefy. For most of his life, Byron dieted fiercely to look more Byronic. Byron knew how to please his audience. When you read him today, it's amazing how modern and funny he seems about other people's hypocrisy. But what about his own?
Why do you think Byron had to sort of fall on every woman that he ever met? Why was he so driven sexually?
Well, I mean, that obviously is how he was born. If you look at his father, Mad Jack, he was the same.
He had sex with his half-sister.
Oh, yes. In fact, it is known that one of Augustus' children was Byron's child, Medora.
Is the idea of his homosexuality overdone, or is that, do you think, perfectly reasonable to suppose that it is true?
I think there's no doubt about it. When he was young, he was somewhat homosexual. I think he was both ways.
Being immoral now hardly means anything, whether it's in life or art. But when Byron was immoral in his poetry, it was a shock. Byron targeted conventional morality because he saw that morality as the face of political oppression. Byron's politics were an early form of what we would now call left-wing. In exile in Europe, Byron wrote to his sister to fix the unspeakable sin of their love affair in her mind forever, and also fix it in history, even if history remembered Byron as a devil, one ranked in some recording page with the worst anarchs of the age. Him wilt thou know, and knowing pause, nor with the effect forget the cause. The great object of life is sensation, Byron once said. To feel that we exist, even though in pain. A little tumult now and then is an agreeable quickener of sensation. I sense deviant number 2 waiting in the wings. Who could it be?